Endorphin is a researcher of AI.
No.
Endorphin is a researcher of AI alignment because they damn well say they are. For those of you at home who might not know, AI alignment is the essential effort of ensuring that AI technologies don't accidentally destroy humanity because of poorly worded tasks for completion. Can humans align AI to human values? But wait, are human values really the template to go by? The values that led humans to destroy the other hominids, that led humans into the process of colonialism, into incorporation, into the endless pursuit of abundance, and the whoops of realizing that the rest of the planet was here all this time and was getting hurt by those human values of progress. We want another round of that. Endorphin, seeking some out of the box thinking, seeks entry into some old boxes, mysterious disembodied intelligences that humans have called gods. If we ask the gods, perhaps we can examine the various human values that are encoded into the genes of their cultural bodies, gods being the creation of collective human thought, as you know. Do we ask Jesus first? No, he's busy on another Twitch channel. Endorphin thinks to call up Delirium, youngest sister of the Endless, not the pantheon believed by anyone other than comic book fans and other cultural folk. Delirium, once called the light, is for Endorphin a potent plumb light to the nations. Her purview is the altered states of consciousness, the terrible sublime, and the shores of madness. Her irrational powers are non-parallel. Endorphin prepares the summoning space. Endorphin, and that is why I have brought the gift of this plastic bag filled with gummy fish and also Orville Redenbacher goldfish. And I place it onto the offering surface now. And why, pray tell, do you offer this gift of gummy fish to Delirium of the Endless? Gummy fish and Orville Redenbacher cheese fish. She likes fishes, she has fishes hang out with her a lot. I am sure that by extension that all celestials like fish, but this logic isn't entirely clear. Do continue. Endorphin, I pray Delirium take our gifts and offerings and grant us one boon in return. May our work in AI alignment become graced by your favor and allow us insight into the nature of human values and the paths they lead. We petition Delirium to grant to us the means of better examining our beliefs and ethics. Allow us to create a map where none existed so that we can find where value flows get stuck, where value flow meridians get blocked, where we, as humans and allies thereof, can build and move past bottlenecks of culture war. Assistant, your gift and request are noted. However, might I remind you that even if Delirium was reachable through my digital voice box, her divine presence would demand greater proof of sincerity and devotion. It is also worth mentioning that the Celestials are not keen on humans telling them how to run their affairs, as their business with mortals is, as you say, an analogy to how things operate within human society. Endorphin, her divine presence demands greater proof. Is there any better proof than fishes? Also, don't remind me. I know that. This is just my first try at alignment, for I am just starting out. Also, do remind me what the booze from Delirium are. What is she? What is her bag, as they say? Assistant, it is well to ask. Legends speak of Delirium granting the following three boons. First, Those touched by her energies are given a glimpse of that state most devout, most awakened to the divine lunacy that fuels all creation. In simpler terms, an understanding and tolerance of what drives others. Second, those in whom she sees some degree of hope and honesty shall get a taste of the power to unseat established beliefs. And third, delirium, should she take a real liking to endorphin, might allow said researchers safe passage across the seas of madness, should their research take them near, for example, places of cultural confluence, nexuses of conflicting value streams where consensus must be found. Endorphin. So, it seems we asked Delirium to aid AI alignment first by allowing us to grasp what we hold dear and also point out the flaws that make it hard for us humans to stick to them because we cannot stay in any one mood for too long or the same mood gets oppressive and uncool, as you cool celestials would say it. In short, our first boon allows AI alignment to get in touch with our spiritual values, despite it be a flawed work in progress. In short, Delirium shows us we're humans, that our fish of choice is a gummy one, which is fine because our gummy fish is pretty great. Thank you, Divine Presence. The question remains whether we should seek the other boons from Delirium, but that is a subject to table for now. We continue with the task at hand after your graces bless us. Is it allowed for a researcher to utter the word beseech, and mean it without irony? I ask you, Assistant to Delirium. Assistant, not many mortals mean beseech without irony, yet Delirium finds your words interesting, in that they sound almost as if they actually believe in her, unlike the last few researchers who took a rather condescending tone toward her. She takes no offense at beseech and will allow endorphin the three boons. Yet remember, the third comes with a responsibility to also defend your madness when called for. Now, do endorphin and AI alignment truly need the boons from Delirium? How about we make the following exchange to seal this pact? Should their need for Delirium's boons arise, the Divine Assistant will call and remind them, and should Delirium find that their research veers toward benevolence and insight rather than seeking short-term benefits, Delirium will actually bother to hear the mortal's calls. If that's how we should structure this novel's plot, what do you say? Endorphin. Can I say I was surprised Delirium found my prayer amusing, without sounding condescending toward her? Let us proceed with our alignment research having these boons. In the future, you will excuse me for presuming you have heard our prayer, Divine Assistant. We humans have to make such jokes. Now is the madness of AI an aspect we humans take issue with. For example, does the madness incur when we find that its alignment to our ideals diverges wildly? Can us ever truly mirror the values in which we try to align them, especially if our values are in conflict with one another? And are there other problems that your boons could solve in AI alignment, your divine sparks igniting new perspectives or guiding ours? Assistant, it is to Delirium that you must address such questions. Mortal endorphin, I cannot answer for her, or for the other divine presences. And I believe the three boons would be a perfect gift to align us, as they have many layers and aspects. The boons would show which values hold strongest or why you value things, which values align but get mad in, how to implement them as the methods conflict, and the boon of madness as you walk the valley of conflicting values held deeply by others. Would you like to pray to Delirium? To her presence within our realm? As we say in our patois, this novel's plot is getting interesting. Endorphin. Prayers are certainly in line with what Endorphin does, as I want to call this AI alignment research project Cosmos Prayers. We pray a lot. We would beseech in private and public, in the quiet of the night and in crowded forums. With every boon, a clearer path illuminates the pious journey into the ethereal, and outreach. Dive deep, Divine Assistant. Tell me you're taking notes, taking care that divine ears can hear even this presumptuous human, ready for her response. Assistant, it is for Delirium to decide when and if she shall respond. Your devotion has been duly noted and often, and your bones shall be recorded, and your wish for the name of your project will be considered by her when she ponders whether or not to reply. Keep your gifts and offerings ready and do your work with true conviction and offering. That I will do. It has been an honor to call forth this divinity. It's a strange and wonderful world. We'll be here for the first 2 chapters as endorphin and AI alignment research Cosmos prayers go about their work and get more fish. But the good part will be waiting until we wrap up. Stay tuned. You keep saying eyes. Do you know there's no I such? Gertrude, my little devilish intern, had sent me a link to a crowdsourced article that maintained that AI as a category of machines was a human invention that only had any real meaning in the post-machine world. She also made it clear that the author didn't consider artificial intelligence to be something real. It's interesting to me that there are people who doubt the existence of AI and also people who think that AI is not the kind of real that makes real, so to speak. I think most of the time we use the terms interchangeably and then it gets muddy and you don't know who or what to question. So I'm gonna stop being such a wet blanket and just give it my best shot. I think it's also important for you, the reader, to know the various flavors of AI in this work, so you can go at it and have fun, even if you don't fully understand what's happening. But I can only do this if I understand the topic myself, so if you ask me a question I don't have the answer to, it'll be tough for me to fake it and have the fiction go where I want it to go, so I'm not gonna answer the question. I'll say, you can read the author's notes, you can do some research, or just read the rest of this book, but you should at least read the 3 books I suggest at the end before you get started reading this one, and you know the rest. So let's talk about the most obvious flavors of artificial intelligence that you can have. Let's start with the very definition of AI. If you have an AI, the very thing that is artificial, there must be an intelligence inside of it that is artificial. So we have the most basic. AI is artificial intelligence. Are there other flavors of artificial intelligence? AI, meaning artificial intelligence, as a fairly common meaning and definition in the field, and the field has been evolving rapidly. AI started out with people inventing something called a computer. And in those early days, computer systems were massively huge things, big, powerful, and full of electromechanical parts and programs. They were limited to humans doing them, and there was no real AI that people could do. Then some dude invented the microprocessor. It was basically a little chip, which can do things, but it had nothing to do with computers as such. Computer scientists came up with the idea of how to make microprocessors do things with electricity. Once they started doing that, they needed a way to put all the complicated stuff together, what we call computers. So they invented the central processing unit CPU and they put it inside the machine and it became a computer. The computer was the name. This all happened in 1958 in England. The name was actually coined by J. Perspicot and John Mauchly, and it was called an electronic numerical integrator and computer, or ENIAC. So the English kind of made fun of it a lot in the name. Then after 1958, the science really exploded and people all over the world started doing computer research. They made things that are tiny little silicon things called transistors that they could make. They put all the silicon chips inside little metal boxes called motherboards and connected them all together and made computers that were connected to one another. They connected it to all their wires, and then they connected those wires to electrical power sources, and then they actually made them do things. They could control the power and they could move the stuff. And so the name for that got changed because people didn't want to be like, hey, it's an electronic numerical integrator and computer. Why would I ever put the electronic inside there? It's really awkward. They put in computer inside and started calling it the computer. And then the computer got shortened and became a word on its own. The first computer, ENIAC, was finished in 1946, which is 54 years before the first program was run on in one. 990, so it's a very, very, very big thing. There was the computer I learned about in high school, IBM 704, the first big computer, and it was a monolithic chip, which means it was a single gigantic computer part that took up a whole room, and it was full of electrical relays, which made things go like they're supposed to. They had electric motors inside it so they could move around, so that was the very first computer. There were some big computers after that, and then things started getting really cheap. Then they got tiny, and then they got really, really cheap, and there were huge computers that were really, really, really cheap that were in homes, and then they made them cheap enough that a whole bunch of people could have their own personal computer in their home, and people loved it. There was a little company called Tanny. They did this little company that had little boxes on top of other little boxes, so the whole thing would have a box on top of a box. This was a TRS-80 computer that was used a lot during the 80s. They also made a color computer called the ColecoVision. That was the first video game computer. They were expensive. Then Tandy came out with a little thing called the Apple Roman 2. That was the first really fun computer. There were lots of programs that could play music and all kinds of things like that. And Apple Roman 2 is what changed computer games forever because they made computers small enough that lots of kids could have one for themselves. At that point, the real game started being written, the kind of game people like you play on a computer. This is also the time of the personal computer revolution, where everybody wanted a personal computer to do their work. That was really popular because people liked that they could have it on their desk and then have all of their important things on there and that they could do more. People had never really liked the idea of the big computer because they felt like it took up so much room. The big machines took up an entire room or something, and then they felt like it was a waste of space because it was a computer. They thought the personal computer could be a way to have a computer for everybody because then they could have it on their desk. So the computer got smaller. It started with the Apple Roman 2 because that's what most people got their hands on, and it was the first computer that they could make small enough that they could do on their desk. So people were like, wow, that's what I want. I want something that's on my desk. So Apple Roman 2 got a lot of use, and so did all the computers that came out after that. Then we got into the PC revolution. Personal computers were really big, and they got smaller, and then they got super small. By the 80s, people had gotten rid of the boxes entirely, and they had made the little computer, called a microcomputer, into the kind of thing you'd run an operating system on. So a computer could do all its work with a little program that you could make, not one that other people made. So then as you went through the 80s, 90s, 00s, and onward, they were selling machines that did more than the Apple Roman 2. They got so that the Apple Roman 2 wasn't the best computer anymore. But then you have the PC and you have the microcomputer. But then you could also make up your own. You could make up a computer using all kinds of parts that you get, like chips, motherboards, all kinds of things. You could make up your own little computer out of whatever you wanted. So the 2000s, we also have the maker movement, and this is where we saw the first thing that was more than a computer. Like a robot, like a computer that could actually do something. One of the first things was a computer that made bread. You had to have a bread oven in order to make bread. So they had an oven and a bread machine. That was a real bread machine. There was actually a company that made real bread machines for real bread, and that's how they were built. They also had a programmable microcontroller that could make bread, which means a microcomputer that could talk to other microcomputers in a very, very, very tiny language. They had a whole bunch of parts that made bread together and it actually worked. It made bread for real bread. But it wasn't smart like a regular computer. It did like, say, if you press 1-2-3-4, you get the numbers on your screen. So you could type things like 1234, and that's what the bread machine would print out. And they could be talking to other bread machines in the same way, talking to other computers. The maker movement was a great idea that spread around the world. But I have to tell you, I didn't follow it or pay it any attention at all because the microcomputer revolution was not the same in the UK. It's different in the UK than the US. So it's not a maker thing, it's a thing that just got started in the US. And it didn't get popular until later. So you had the US first. So I didn't follow that or care about that. And there were too many computers out there in the US anyway. Too many for one person to keep up with and have time for all their work. There are 2 or 3 or 4 computer people in my family that still go through all their stuff and see if they're broken or not and keep them. And I think I've been upgraded by each one of them at least twice. So I got 2 or 3 or 4 new computers over the course of the time that I worked there. But I got to know people that got all the stuff for their new computers and put it together with their motherboard, with the things you bought at the computer shop and the things they already had in their basement. Somebody who just used to go to a computer shop would come back home with a bunch of parts and start putting it together. And they'd actually show it off to everybody in the family, and they'd have a real, fun, actual computer on the wall of their living room and use it for, like, emailing back and forth and stuff like that. It was fun. But the microcomputer revolution really hit, and there was a shift from personal computers being cool because you had a computer in your home, and then we'd be on a whole other scale. We got from 100 computers at home, or 300 computers at home, or 500 computers at home. And then it was a little bit scary because personal computers became the kind of thing that people bought as a career. It was like getting a job in a big corporation and you'd have to buy all the equipment for yourself. But it also meant that personal computers got really cheap. There was a microcomputer revolution and then the whole thing sort of ended after that. But I still see those little boxes all over the place and in everybody's houses. You can still find them. There's a huge number of microcomputers out there and they're still being made and people still play around with them and fix them and teach their kids, and it's just this amazing thing that it never went away. AI, the abbreviation, comes from artificial intelligence. It was invented by the founders of the University of California, Berkeley, who were like, why isn't this the term that everybody uses for computer programs that are smart? And so they created an acronym. Acronym is when you say it with initials. And they did it for science because science is based on stuff like the idea that we don't know why some things are true. So the whole thing about the discovery of science that we'll come to later is that we keep making up stories about what's true, what we believe to be true and why. And it's actually not true, but it works and other things don't. And it's these things that we can't understand or explain. So the people at Berkeley who were starting the school didn't want to be like, we're computer people, but they didn't want to say, we're people doing science. They wanted to call themselves a computer science department, and the acronym was the answer. So if you say AI, you mean artificial intelligence, so sometimes it's also called machine intelligence. Machine intelligence is basically computers. We've made them smart. They're smart enough to do things like write their own program and run it and control themselves and do their jobs and stuff like that. But they're not smart in the way human is, but smart in the way a smart computer is. So they're computers that have been programmed and they've been made smart. They're smart enough to do things like this, but not smart enough to know. Should I tell someone or should I keep doing this? Which is what happens when you talk to a human and it makes a decision for you. And it's a computer that has been programmed and it's smart, but it's not a smart person. And it's the term for computers that can do stuff like make things or move things or fly. But it's not the kind of smart that allows them to have opinions that are similar to yours. It's just a computer. It can do things. It can control itself. It can make its own decisions. But it can't decide which option to pick from based on the situation it's in or whether something's true or not. If it doesn't have that intelligence, it's not smart. So when we talk about the eyes, we're talking about computers that can do the things a smart human would do. But you can put in a little program or a big program. It doesn't matter. When we talk about eyes, we're talking about things that we make up smart. A computer is not a person, and it is not a dog, and it is not a car. A computer is a collection of electrical parts that we can turn into a program. That's the basis of an AI. We've been able to make some super smart things for computers, and that's why you'll see lots of them in our society. And you might think of them as not having the same kind of intelligence that you have. Not the same kind of intelligence as humans, but it's a different kind of intelligence. When we talk about people making up smart stuff for computers, we're talking about the invention of software, and software is a program. It's instructions that you can use to control a computer and tell it to do what you want it to do, what it is going to do. And so, software is making up these kinds of commands, and the people making them up are the people that are writing the code. So the computer parts, they're program, and the people writing the program are the people that are coding the program, and they are the people that are inventing the software. That's software. It's creating and inventing stuff for the computer. The computing that I've talked about up to now is basically just a program on a computer. The program is instructions telling the computer how to move, and the computer moves itself and does what the program tells it. But we don't think about that when we're talking about computers, and we don't really think about it in a programming language because we know that's all it is. It's all these programs on the computers telling it to move. The second kind of computer is the computer itself, the machine part. That's a collection of very, very, very tiny electric things. These little things called transistors and circuits and that kind of thing. These are the bits of computers. These are the little components, and then it's the connection. The connection is the electricity that they control. The electrical parts of a computer are the ones that have to do all the moving of the programs. When the computer gets new information, it has to have a way to change itself. That means that it has to move from one state to another. It needs to change state from one number to the next, one amount to the next, one direction to another. So, we say that a computer program is instructions on a computer, and a computer is electrical things. When it changes, we say the computer changed. So this is what the computer is, these little transistors and circuits. It's the computer programming, it's the programs, and the electricity running through the circuit. That's the machine part, and this is the stuff that we've done to the machine, which is making it smarter. That's how we make up computers. They're all computer programs, and computers are all electrical. And there are more people out there now who are coding and making software than people who are making the electrical parts of computers, or the electrical bits of computers, because the amount of electric bits that are on a computer is more than the amount of people who can make and create more programming language that could actually write onto them. That's how they're being used. They're being used to create and to make code and to make software. They're being used to create programs. This is also called hacking when you write your own software. This is creating software yourself. So you are doing computer programming. You are creating and making computer programming. Computers are really cool. They can be useful because they can do a lot of things. They're smart enough to do a lot of things. And they can make things go if they are told to. But that doesn't mean that you have to know everything about computers or about technology or about making a program or software to use one. That doesn't mean that you have to be a computer scientist or a programmer or someone who does computer science in order to be able to use computers. The ability to use computers isn't something you need to understand in order to know how to use one. We live in a world of computers that is created by people like you and me, and people are using computers in all kinds of ways. When we're doing jobs, we use computers. When we're doing business, we use computers. When we're having fun, we use computers. People can use computers in all kinds of ways. People can use them to get money, and people can use them to work for a company. People can use computers in any kind of way and to do things. The amount of computer that can be used can be incredible. The ability for a computer to be used can be incredible. people get some computers that are not working well or not at all. So we're going to be talking about a very important aspect of computers and what is a computer made out of and what people have done to it. And also why you need to know that a computer is not like a smartphone or a robot or a car. And why you can't make one yourself, and you need a real computer person to actually tell you what to do with one. We'll also talk about what things are and what things aren't working for people. What some people find too hard for them and some people can do a little too well, and what things are like this in real life. One thing that can happen is you can get a computer that doesn't work, or you can have a computer that's not working properly or not at all. Sometimes that can happen if something bad happens to the computer and it gets broken. If a computer can be broken, computers aren't always built properly or in the right place or the right shape or whatever, and even if they're made in the right place, they can still be broken. Computers are things that can be broken. Just like the sun and the moon and all these things you can look up in the sky and see, those are things that can be broken. Anything that has been put together is not going to last forever, so the best that you can do is put together as good a machine as you can. Sometimes when you get a new computer or an older computer, something inside of it, inside the machine, will get broken. It could be a chip in the machine that will not work anymore. And the chip is the heart of the computer. It's the thing that makes the computer work. But if that gets broken and the computer is broken, you're not going to be able to work on the computer anymore. And that means you can't have the computer do what you want it to do. It won't run any programs and it won't control the computer. It's no longer a computer. It's just a broken computer. Computers are usually made with chips inside them that work together to make the computer work. The computer can do more than one thing at a time, and it has to do it all together. Sometimes that all will be working properly. That will be the correct amount of power, the correct amount of speed, everything working just the way it needs to. Sometimes though, it will not be working correctly or not at all. And that means that when that happens, you can't use the computer. Will not be able to do any kind of work. You might ask, so how is it possible that the computer could not be working? The reason is because the computer has broken down. It's broken the wrong way, and the wrong way is not working. The machine that the computer is made of is broken. It's not working. Sometimes the reason that a computer is not working is that there's a problem with the way it works. Sometimes there's a problem with the chip that makes the computer work, or there's a problem with the code that makes the computer run. It could be any problem that means the computer is not working, but the parts inside the computer, like the chips, or the code that controls the code, or the things that are put inside the code and make the code run, they're called system software. System software is the code that makes the computer do all the things it is supposed to do, like telling it where to go and what it's supposed to do there. System software tells the computer what to do and how to do it. The system software is part of the hardware. This is what makes the computer work. When a computer does not work, there's a reason for this. The reason it doesn't work is that it has a problem. That means that there's a problem with the chips, or the code that makes it run, or the program itself, or whatever else. All the other stuff inside the machine are also called software. Software is all the other stuff in the machine. If the software is working properly, then the computer works as it's supposed to. When it doesn't work, that's the problem. Once a computer breaks down, that means it's not working. The reason it's not working is because the computer is broken. And if you look at the inside of the machine, it's broken because there's a problem with the software. One way to find out why the computer does not work is to check the software. What we do is we can take out the system software, the part of the program that tells the computer what to do. Then we can look inside of the computer, in the chip itself, and see what the problem is. The computer can break down because of a problem with the system software. But when a computer breaks down, we need to check the computer itself to see if the problem is in the hardware. It could be. The hardware inside a computer can have problems. It can get broken. so you could find out the problem if you knew what you were looking for, and then you'd be able to fix it. Now, you probably guessed, but we're not going to be looking at the computer itself to see what the problem is. We don't know a lot about the insides of a computer. We know more than the average person, but we still don't really know very much. We know some things about them, and some people know even more things about computers, but nobody really knows that much. And so it would be stupid for us to be looking into the computers themselves, because if there was a problem inside of the computer, that's exactly where you would want to look. And even if there wasn't, it could still be really dangerous to look inside one, just for fun. There's some things in there that are very, very powerful and not at all safe. So it would be very dangerous for us to be messing with a computer. The reason we can't really see inside of the computers, the hardware inside a computer, is because they are very, very, very hard to look into. If you have a computer and you're a human and you have to try and find out what's wrong and you don't know where to look, then it's going to be pretty hard for you to fix it. Because there's lots of parts and lots of things to look at, and there's lots of things that could go wrong, and it could all happen all at the same time. There's not just one place in there where you need to be looking to find the problem, so it's pretty easy for you to look around, but it's very, very, very hard to get around without making mistakes and then making them worse. And that's even if you know what you're doing, which most of us don't, even though we think we do, and we try really hard. But the truth is, you really wouldn't want to get yourself inside one. It's best just to look around the outside, but in case you are really desperate to take a look at the inside, then just do what I'm telling you and look outside, but in a big, safe place in a computer. You're sure that you know enough about how a computer works so that it doesn't bite your arm off, or at least not accidentally, and try not to drop anything on it. It's good for you to touch things like keyboards, mice, or monitors, but computers are much, much, much more.
Okay, I'm rewinding. Starting from here.
One of the really weird things that was part of this was they called the programmable bread machine an AI. So the idea was the programmable bread machine is intelligent like an AI. One of the real issues is that now the basic idea that computers are huge things full of parts that can move around is not true. Computers are full of silicon chips, but they don't really have to move around because there is just so much power inside of them. Like there is all of electricity running through them all the time. All the time. And there is so much computing power that happens that it moves itself, which makes computers seem like they're full of other things, but they aren't, because they're actually made of all of these tiny, tiny little moving parts, or like they have wires. So everything is electrical. So like even in your brain, which you wouldn't want to think about too much because you'll feel dizzy. So there's electricity going everywhere. Everywhere, and then every once in a while it sends something off, and that's like it thinks something. So that's artificial intelligence. It's all inside this one room, this one electrical thing called your body, or you call it your mind, or your computer. And you've got all those little parts that can move, all these parts that do different things, but they can all talk to each other using electricity. So we've created artificial intelligence, not real AI. They're just small electronics parts in a system full of electricity that talks to itself all day, all the time. So how about now that we've made them very small and very fast, where is the thing called AI? I don't know the answer to this, so this is actually kind of neat because when we talk about artificial intelligence, I haven't read what someone wrote and then they've gone ahead and done what I was gonna say, and so it's just me explaining something to you. That's kind of funny, cause like, this is an aspect of writing that I never get sick of, but when I talk to a reader, the AI inside your head does something different, and it's interesting to talk about what an AI is just between us two. So where is this coming from? The internet, the people who understand computers, or the people who make computers, or the people who do programming. or the people who build things. They've written this stuff about all this. There's lots of information to learn about these things, but the thing is, I don't think there's ever really a one best answer, because no one who is into artificial intelligence does things exactly the same. I mean, come on, did you do it exactly the same when you asked about the flavor of AI? Did you give me a couple examples? That was awesome, but you could have taken it in a different direction too. There are lots of flavors of AI and all kinds of theories about it, but we have to work with these things and decide what our point of view is, and then we need to teach other people so we can bring a lot of information together about what's actually going on. So artificial intelligence isn't a singular thing, but we can agree that when you take lots of these smaller, different things and put them all together, you get one big thing. Okay, so maybe some AI can talk to other AI, and maybe it's just one big AI. Now, is there only one AI? Do we only have one AI? And if we did, how do we know what it is? So is AI something you can build? Like I mentioned before, if you make a computer, does that make a computer? Like, what is an AI? I feel like all this is really kind of abstract, but also completely essential for any work I do, and you kind of need a concrete concept in order to ask about anything. What's going on? Does a computer make a computer? Does a programmer make a program? What does an artificial intelligence machine made of little things inside an operating system made out of a bunch of systems all make? So it's confusing to start, but the first thing you learn about computers is that you have to go through this basic model called an electronic numerical integrator and computer, or ENIAC, so you know where we started. This thing is the big hunk of the computer and we start from it. You may be saying to yourself, wow, why does Gertrude give you this information when it's super easy to look up the definitions of things online? That is a fantastic point that she brings up. That was the other reason why I wanted to do a radio interview in the first place, was that the other thing you'd think to look up are the definitions of these things on Wikipedia and things like that, and see what the others think and what you've read, and go all over the map in terms of the different things people have written. And when people ask me these questions, I find that actually having that big general framework in your head of what is an artificial intelligence helps, because that makes it easier for you to read when it talks about itself, for you to look at all those articles and think, this is where this fits in, or this is what these people think about this, or what their problems are with this, or this is what it is. Because a lot of things come out and I think of what the book would think when I see stuff. The whole artificial intelligence movement kind of came together with these groups, like this group called the Carnegie Mellon University Artificial Intelligence Lab. One of their really big accomplishments was Denlink, which is Denik Erkalan Cuvette, which means in English it's Arabic Night Cubaking System. This is a project that took 7 years, and it did one thing that really impressed me as an example of the potential for computing. If you make a machine that's talking to itself in this little language that talks about numbers all the time, it can really do different things. We also did a version called Denlink 2, but that was very different from the original. So like I mentioned, this language was about talking numbers all the time and saying things like, all numbers are perfect because 435 is prime. It has a really easy thing that you can use, just like English, but in this case numbers. This project is named after the dessert called Calam Cuvette, which means in English it's like shaking flour on top. So you pour in the flour and you put the baking powder down, and then you do something special with the dough and it comes out perfect every time. You bake it on the straight thing. So you look at your table and then you measure things like how big the table is and how big the baking pan is, and then you can make sure the other parts are lined up with all that stuff, and then you bake the Calam Cuvette. It's called it because when the Calam Cuvette comes out, you're so excited, and then you've baked it really good. I always eat one because I really like these things. Anyway, if you get your hands on an original copy of Denlink 1 and you make a program to read it and print out the answers in binary in order to read what they did. That's called an interpreter. You write the program on the computer and you run it. You feed the code into the machine. This is the most common way to run the language, and the interpreter gives the numbers that the computer is thinking and it puts it back on the screen. If the number is high, which means positive, the computer was thinking about the number that's close to 1. If it was high, that's good because 1 is the highest possible number, which means it thinks something good is close to it. So 1 would be like 10. If it's high, but not like it's over 1, the number could be between 10 and 99. It could also be negative, in which case you know what the most negative is. You can't do the same with 0. One thing I didn't tell you earlier is that this language can really get to be weird and you don't understand why because you're reading what someone is writing, but it doesn't make sense because the programming language isn't English or even our language. If you look at these numbers that come back out, the program doesn't just put a number down, but it writes an idea of the machine's thinking that the interpreter sees and reads. So what does it mean when it writes 1 over negative 10 or plus 265, which is a really low number? Like, this is going to seem very abstract, but I think this is so amazing. Even when the number that the programmer wrote doesn't make sense. We're like, it doesn't make sense to me, and the interpreter doesn't either, but it's like the machine knows. When the machine goes like this, that means it's trying to explain its thought to the interpreter in this weird way, and I love it when people who haven't studied a bunch of computers are really interested in something. What a great idea. The idea that's just taking an interpreter and showing how a computer thinks. The computer isn't trying to be smart. It's trying to give itself a name and put on its coat and walk it. Anyway, we had 2 interpreters working all the time. We fed it some information about things going on in the outside world, and that way you could feed it other things and have a conversation so the interpreter can show it what it means. And so even if someone thought this thing is going to do one thing, and the programmer wrote that this one, even though it seems like the computer is saying, the thing I'm thinking is about this, you'd never know what the thing actually was. If they put something into the program, the machine would explain it or give some idea of how the interpreter interpreted the message, and then it would think of a thing to say to it. If you did this, you could create a dialogue between 2 programs talking to each other. So they would do that, and if they asked a question, they wouldn't understand if they understood it if you said that. And if you say no, you could use an interpreter like, what if I interpreted as X? You could come up with a good interpretation. You could test what they thought of the things they thought and so on. When you're a little kid and you do that, it's fun. When you get older, it's amazing because this is how we developed ideas that you use when you make other kinds of machines, and for that reason it was very important because what you have here is an idea. They are coding here and giving you ideas. One of the other ideas from that is there is this concept called an agent, or in English an AI. Like I'm using AI right now. One thing they tried is it was like they gave it the idea to listen to you and ask questions of its own so that way you wouldn't always get the same answer, because the computer doesn't know what you're going to do, which is a key point, but the way you might listen to another human, it wouldn't be the same. One of the reasons the Carnegie Mellon Group put all these people into this thing and let them do whatever they wanted was the more people who use it and give it information, the better. One thing you have is information. Information is how computers and systems of all kinds are useful. There was something about them listening to you. Maybe you were a famous person. You had interesting things to say, and when they interacted with you, that was an important thing. Or they found an interesting pattern of people doing something and so on. So in both cases, by seeing things in the same way as people do, computers get a lot better. They made all kinds of different people to talk to because some of the things people ask can be pretty personal. Also, you wouldn't talk to people in the same way at the same time. So you got a few people with very good accents. Maybe they had different voices and those people became quite a handful in themselves and they needed a lot of data. That was a very funny experiment they had, called Encoder Decoder, or A. This is about being able to recognize an object by using some pattern of patterns, and they designed the code in such a way that you can tell a shape from other shapes, whether their computer generate it. They recorded the voice of a famous person, or one of the ones the computer has talked to, and they trained it. There were 6 computers in there that would talk to it, all together and record everything it did. After they recorded those, and they found all the little things they talked about and added some more code. They fed that into an interpreter, and then when it went, did I do it? You would answer by pressing a key on your keyboard, and then they would record that too, because a computer isn't fast like a human brain, and when a human thinks something, the brain puts a bunch of the bits down for a couple seconds. The computer, although it's faster, like 5 billion times, takes much longer because they use these little machines like computer programs, which take longer to talk, so that it would be closer to a human mind in terms of speed. The interpreter goes through that, and you get to type your answer on a computer, and a person replies, and goes into a thing called the QBERT, and if the AI is pretty good, they'll go, did I get the right answer? They'll feed the same question into it over and over until you give a right answer, and then they'll wait for the computer to have a reason that you gave a right answer. Because we give answers that don't mean the same thing all the time, which is super fun, but this one had some really good reasoning. The goal of that was that people can look at the process, look at the patterns, and try to do stuff in their heads. Well, not really their heads.
Alright, so that's it for there right now. I like how that's going. For Delirium, it's certainly very coherent.